Okay, well, I'm here to respond to you guys about Keone's claim that social media has a negative effect on its users. He follows this up with two main secondary claims. One, that social media is a tool for negative thought, and the second is that social media is used to spread information that results in negative outcomes. Now, both of his secondary claims he splits into two separate categories. I want to first talk about one of the categories from the first claim, the claim that the constant spread of videos focusing on certain body parts of women has a negative impact in our society, or negative impact on its users. Now, the main problem with this claim is that there was very little, if at all, any evidence given during the speech, and in his bibliography there was only one source that actually talked about the way that women are viewed in social media. The problem with that source is, though, it is a very old source using information from around 2004. Between 2001 and 2004 was a focus of most of its information, referencing shows that, such as The Swan from Fox that actually ended in late 2004. And even when it was on, there was already enough controversy about the show, which focused on the appearance of ugly duckling women and how to turn them into swans. Even in 2004, there was enough of a controversy to shut down the show. And there have been a lot of changes in how these sort of issues are addressed on social media, such as with the case of Sam Pepper. He was accused of sexually harassing women in some of his videos on YouTube, and he was then removed from YouTube for a while. All of his videos were taken off of monetization, and he was basically no longer able to make any living off of his job of doing YouTube. The change in the environment has now made it so that these things that used to be more acceptable are no longer acceptable on social media, and so we can no longer look at it as a negative effect of social media. Another point he brings up is those of the online challenges. Now, he had two main pieces of evidence for the online challenges. One of them was the 4-year-old who died from ingesting too much cinnamon. Now, almost all social media sites have an age limit of about 13 years old, such as Facebook's, before you should be able to be allowed on. I don't believe that this piece of evidence is actually helping to say that there's a problem with the challenges, but pointing more towards a problem with parents using the internet as sort of a babysitter for their children. Another point he brings up is that there were 37 ingestions of Tide Pods this year. He said that only about half of them were on purpose, leaving us with about 18. Now, there is no evidence that these were necessarily just because of the Tide Pod challenge that has been around on the internet. The reason that the joke of the Tide Pod challenge came up was because the Tide Pods themselves look like candy, and they were pointing out the fact that, hey, maybe people will accidentally eat them. That could be what is happening here. There is no evidence saying that the reason these people have ingested them is because they saw the challenge. Now, the other two parts of his argument are that there are hate messages brought up and a lot of hateful attitudes are brought up on the internet. And then his other point is that there's a lot of false information that will elicit negative actions. Both of these points focus on the spread of thoughts and information throughout social media, and I believe there is a large problem here with how he is reaching his conclusion. The internet and a lot of social media is very powerful at not just spreading harmful information, but spreading information in general. Websites like Twitter, nowhere on their website do they claim that they are a news organization or that they are providing the news. So when you hear the fact that 73% of people have seen something that is false on Twitter, that shouldn't come as much of a surprise, because people can post whatever they want. Now, just because the internet has the ability to have negative information does not mean it is having a negative effect on its users. The users should be able to look and critically think about what information they are receiving. Now, there are a lot of hate messages spread around on the internet with people using different slurs and insulting random people that they've never met before. But myself personally, I've had a lot of very good experiences on the internet. When I was in high school, I had issues where I was binge eating and purging, and through social media, I found other people who were going through similar struggles that I was, and I was able to talk with them and able to help. They were able to help me, I was able to help them. With social media, you can find people like you who you may not be able to find openly in your everyday life. The anonymity that gives people the power to insult also gives people the power to connect better with someone without having to think, oh, this person I see every day in high school, I'm not going to be able to tell them everything I want, but I'm able to tell this person who there may not be as much repercussion. I'm going to be able to tell them the true problems that I'm feeling. So I believe due to the faulty evidence given for some of his points and the failure to address the majority of the information that is presented on the internet, other than just the negative information, I believe that social media does not in fact have a negative effect on its users. It does have negative information spread, but that will not lead to a negative effect unless everyone allows it to. Thank you.
All right, structurally you started off fine, indicating what the advocate's claims and secondary claims were, and then it breaks down into the minor claims under that first point. And then once you get past the online challenge, everything kind of runs together. So although I thought that you started well, being pretty well organized in the first half of the speech, the second half of the speech, not quite as much. Your challenge on the lack of evidence on the impact concerning the influence of body parts and image, that sort of thing. I thought you did a good job challenging their evidence, suggesting that it's out of date, that it deals with material that's been gone for more than a dozen years, and in fact you do assert that it was controversial at the time and largely criticized. I think that would have been a good piece of information to include there. That's just kind of an assumption that you present. The Sam Pepper example, I'm not familiar with Sam Pepper. I assume it's some some YouTube star who did something obnoxious and got demonetized. Where that information came from, I don't know. Somebody wrote an article about it, and apparently you're citing that article, but you're actually citing the article. You're just telling us this as if we're all going to know. Now, maybe some people in here will know Sam Pepper. I don't. So I think you ought to give me the source citation and a little bit more context on it. The online challenge thing, I think people have heard about it. The idea that the 4-year-old is affected by this when there's guidelines about when social media is supposed to be used. I thought that was a reasonable press there. The suggestion that somebody, parents needed to be a little bit more responsible. I think that's again a reasonable press on this particular point. There might be other issues that go along with this. Again, I think one of the things you might want to do is compare this kind of media to other ways in which information gets spread. I don't know that we could track down all of those harms to the social media. Sometimes people just, they tell somebody else about it in real life. Believe it or not, people still exist in real life. Like you made the kind of charge about the Tide Pods as an illustration of that. You say, well, we had 37 of these, 18 of which were, on purpose. I don't know how you take one of these without, that seems like a weird thing, but 18 on purpose, and you say that there's no demonstration that it's related to this online challenge. That's an okay press, but I'm not exactly sure that you've got any other reason to believe this, except that maybe they look like candy and people just randomly, 18 people randomly thought it looked like candy and decided to chew on it. I'm still unclear as to what the harmful consequence was. Did anybody die? Did anybody get really sick? Did anybody do anything except spit it out? I'm not quite sure on what happened with these particular cases and why that's such a horrible sort of thing. Now, the hate messages and the false information, I think that's kind of an attempt to structure that second point. It's not, like I said, as clear as the first point was. Again, you've got some general presses here, some reasonable questions to make. I think 90% of what you said here could have been said 5 minutes, almost immediately after the speech, thinking about it for a couple of minutes and then writing down some notes. You had extra time to get ready. It just feels like there's a little bit of underdevelopment on those points. I do appreciate the personal example here, but I think it's not hard to find other information about how social media has been able to accomplish positive things, certainly a lot of things that would outweigh, the Tide Pod Challenge. All right, thank you.